Whitney Houston said that sometimes she would look at God and ask him, "Why is this happening to me?" And then she would have dreams where she was on a swaying bridge and a storm was coming. Crowned the queen of pop and soul, Whitney Houston was a unique performer who connected with audiences in a very special way. But in her life, there was a big battle. Who would win it? The demons or the music?
Welcome to Trembol Podcast, the place for music stories that thrill.
Chapter 1, A Happy Childhood with a Big Secret. Hello, my name is Whitney Elizabeth Houston. I was born on August 9th, 1963 in New Jersey, USA. As a young child, my father, John Russell Houston Jr., gave me the nickname Nippy, which my friends and family would continue to call me throughout my life.
Wake up! Wake up, Nippy! Nippy!
The biggest inspiration in my life was always my mother, Emily Drinkard. She was a gospel and soul singer. Everyone knew her as Cissy. Hers is the only voice that really got me excited about singing. In fact, she would be the one who taught me all about singing.
Just lift him up! Save him up! Just lift go!
My mother, Cissy, tried her hand at a solo career, but was unsuccessful. She did succeed as a member of the Drinkard Singers, with whom she won a Grammy. She also founded the Sweet Inspirations before becoming a soloist. My father, John, was a former military man who later became chief city planner for the mayor of Newark. I have to admit, it was a very corrupt administration. You couldn't build a building without my father's approval, which he used to his own advantage, as you can imagine. I had 3 older brothers, a half-brother on my father's side, John III, another on my mother's side, Gary, and Michael, my favorite, whom I followed everywhere. He also dabbled as a singer and also as a basketball player. We all grew up together in the ghetto in Newark. They said of me that I was a sassy kid and a bit of a know-it-all. They weren't wrong. My house always played gospel and my mother's music. In addition to her band, she was backing up the likes of Aretha Franklin and Elvis, so she spent a lot of time outside. That meant that me and my siblings had to stay with other families for quite some time. You know, throughout my career, my race was often questioned because I had a lighter skin tone than my parents. In my neighborhood, there were a lot of black people, and I was always picked on because of my skin and because I dressed smart. I can assure you that both me and my parents were African American. I didn't have many friends, and I spent a lot of time in church, but I was a good and pretty girl. My cousins were also singers and quite popular. One was known as Diane and the other as Dee Dee Warwick. My aunts and uncles formed a group called the Drinkard Singers. I even had a distant cousin who was an opera singer, Leontine Price. To top it off, Aretha Franklin became my honorary aunt, and the great Darlene Love was my godmother. So you can imagine what family parties were like. In 1970, when I was 7 years old, as my parents' jobs allowed, trying to escape the race riots in Newark, we moved to a house with a garden and pool in a better area called East Orange. I also changed schools to an all-girls private school because my parents wanted to get me away from the bullying I had experienced and the dangerous streets. I can tell you that it was a very good childhood. My parents raised us in the Baptist faith. In fact, when I was only 5 years old, I joined the choir at New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, where I also learned to play the piano. My debut as a soloist would be right there singing the hymn, "Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah," at the age of 12.
Guide me, O Thou Great Jehovah.
The truth is, I wasn't really clear on who God was, but I was sure He loved music. My mother, Cissy, was my singing teacher, and I can assure you she was very tough. I remember coming home many days angry with her after the lesson. At the age of 13, Whitney already knew that I wanted to be a singer, and I let my mother know so, which made my mother even stricter with me, and she enrolled me at Franklin Elementary School, which today has my name, Whitney E. Houston Academy of Creative and Performing Arts. Then I would go on to Mount St. Dominic Academy. In 1977, at the age of 14, I entered a state talent show, placing second. But the really important milestone was that I joined my mother's band to sing backing vocals for her. My debut would be the following year, 1978, at Town Hall in Manhattan singing Tomorrow from the musical Annie. That would be my first ovation, the first of many.
bless and good night.
I also collaborated on recordings by other artists like Lou Rawls and Chaka Khan, and even recorded lead vocals with my mother on the song Life's a Party. I wanted my mother to take me to record labels to try my luck, but both she and my father said I needed to grow up more, so I started making a living as a model. It was actually a bit of a fluke. A photographer saw me at a benefit concert I was attending at Carnegie Hall. He loved me, and soon after I became one of the first black women to appear on the cover of a fashion magazine, 17. You won't believe it, but I was one of the most sought-after teen models in the country, appearing in fashion ads for Glamour, Cosmopolitan, and Young Miss. But my thing was music, and I continued to record vocals for artists like Michael Zager and Luther Vandross. In the meantime, I finished my study. Chapter 2: The Path of Music and Doom. In 1981, at the age of 17, I hired my first manager, Gene Harvey, and began to audition with some record labels, which would lead me to sing on songs like Memories by the band Material, or Eternal Love by Paul Jabara. Elektra Records offered me a contract, but my life would really change at a gig my mother had in New York at the 7th Avenue South nightclub in Manhattan, which I accompanied her to. My mother, Cissy, pretended to be hoarse and asked me to fill in for her. The place was packed and I was a little scared, but I went out there and imitated my mother's every move. The following week, Clive Davis from Arista Records came to see me. Upon hearing me sing Greatest Love of All, he offered me a worldwide record deal. Even though I already had several offers on the table, I signed with him at the age of 19. Just 2 weeks later, Davis was already featuring me on The Merv Griffin Show.
Here's Whitney Houston.
One of my first performances with Arista Records was the song Home from the musical The Wiz. But it wasn't all joy. Something unexpected had just shaken up our lives, and it was discovered that my mother was having an affair with the pastor of the church.
Oh my God!
Which my father, of course, couldn't stand, separating. It really hurt me, so much so that I went to live with my best friend, Robin Crawford. My brothers didn't like Robin. They thought she was bad and was only with me because she was a lesbian and wanted something with me. I was always very free and let myself flow. So Robin and I were like thick as thieves. At that time, I recorded my first duet with Teddy Pendergrass. The track was called Hold Me. It would be my first hit, reaching the top of the R&B charts. I also continued to model from time to time, like in the Canada Dry beverage commercial.
Aren't you ready for Canada Dry ginger ale?
Or doing commercial jingles, like the one for the Steak and Ale restaurant chain.
Steak and Ale.
In 1985, I finally released my first single, Saving All My Love for You.
So I'm saving all my love for you.
Followed by How Will I Know?
How will I know if he really loves me? I say a prayer with every heartbeat.
And Greatest Love of All.
Learning to love yourself is the greatest love.
All part of my first album, Whitney Houston, which would go 6 times platinum. The list of records that the album broke is countless. Whitney Houston stayed more than 3 years on the Billboard 200, being #1 for 14 weeks. The album reached the top 5 in more than 10 countries. At the time, it sold 14 million copies, although today it is more than 25 million. I was the first female solo artist to release 3 #1 singles from the same album. I received 4 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year and Best Female Pop Vocal Performance for Saving All My Love for You. The video for How Will I Know won me an MTV Video Music Award, and at first, the network almost didn't play the video because I was a black female artist. The thing is that the song hit so hard that they had no choice but to change their minds and broadcast it. This would open the door for many other African American artists such as Janet Jackson and Tracy Chapman. In July 1986, I embarked on my first world tour, the Greatest Love World Tour, performing 50 concerts until the end of the year. With fame also came rumors about my personal life. I was linked to Eddie Murphy, a famous quarterback named Randall Cunningham, and even Robert De Niro was rumored to be after me. Although my first public love would be restaurateur Brad Johnson, then musician Jermaine Jackson, and actor Eddie Murphy. On top of all this was the specter of my homosexual relationship with my friend Robin, something the record company hated because of the bad press it brought and because it erased the image of the perfect young woman I represented. My father, John Houston, was left in charge of my career, something he loved for the power it gave him. He put my mother Cissy and my 2 brothers on the label's payroll, although they didn't have a very clear role. My brother Gary joined the choir. He wasn't thrilled about it, but it was what he played. My other brother Michael was everyone's official road manager or entertainer. Basically, they were doing what they had always done, watching and protecting me, but this time surrounded by fame, money, parties, women, and lots of drugs. I was no exception. From marijuana to cocaine, at that time I took everything. It was very simple. I asked my brothers for what I wanted, and I had it right away. The same thing that had happened to me as a child happened to me again with fame. They began to criticize me for the color of my skin. I had a way of singing that the Afro-American public did not consider theirs because it was closer to pop. But the truth was much simpler than all that. I did not sing black or white, I sang from the heart. Chapter 3, I Want to Dance with Someone, Worldwide Success. In June 1987, my second album, simply called Whitney, was released. The album was a huge commercial success, making me the first woman in the history of music to debut at #1 on the American Billboard chart, a milestone that I replicated in dozens of countries around the world. The first single was my most iconic song, I Want to Dance with Somebody Who Loves Me. It would go straight to #1 and is also one of the most loved songs by fans, accumulating more than 1 billion listens. It was followed by Didn't We Almost Have It All? So emotional. And Where Do Broken Hearts Go? With all this, I got 7 consecutive #1s, more than Elvis and the Beatles. In 1987, I started my second world tour, 2 years and 150 concerts in what became the highest grossing tour of the year by a female performer. That year alone, I grossed $43 million. As part of the tour, I played at Wembley in front of 72,000 people in support of the then-imprisoned Nelson Mandela. In 1988, I recorded the song for the Summer Olympics, One Moment in Time. A year later, in 1989, I created the Whitney Houston Foundation for Children to raise funds for the needs of children around the world. The organization deals with homelessness, children with cancer or AIDS, and other self-help issues. It continues to exist today under the name Whitney E. Houston Legacy Foundation. That same 1989, the hatred that I was telling you about towards the color of my skin became palpable at the Soul Awards, where I was booed. Although not all that night would be negative, because at that gala, I would meet Bobby Brown, a boy from the neighborhood like me, funny as hell, and who had also become a new music star. Bobby and I started dating. We were completely in love, so in 1992, we would get married. It hurt my good friend Robin, but I knew I had to go my own way. Soon after, I became pregnant with our first and only child, Bobby Christina Brown, whom we all called Chrissy. We would later try to have more children, but I suffered several miscarriages, one of them during the filming of The Bodyguard. When Chrissy was born in 1993, I was 30 years old and my career was going strong, so I took her on tour with me. Although it was not the ideal space for the child, I preferred to have her close by. The one who took care of her the most was my Aunt Bay, especially at night when she had colic. In fact, she would sleep with my aunt until she was 8 years old. Before all that, in 1990, I released my third album, I'm Your Baby Tonight. It was the first album on which I acted as executive producer and exercised total control over the creative process. The album was much more versatile, including hard-hitting rhythms, soulful ballads, and dance tracks. While it did not achieve the success of the first two, it was the 10th best-selling album of the year with 10 million copies. The album's standout track was I'm Your Baby Tonight,
I'm giving you everything. I'm your baby tonight.
The song All the Man That I Need is a subtle and deep track that sticks in your heart when you hear it. All of these tracks topped the Billboard Hot 100 as well. The single My Name Is Not Susan was remixed by British rapper Monty Love, being one of the first cases of remixing a pop song with the participation of a rapper, which would become so popular in the 2000s.
My name is not Susan, so watch what you say. If you still need her, then be on your way.
Also memorable is my duet with Stevie Wonder on We Didn't Know. Incidentally, on the Japanese version of the album, I included a track called Higher Love. Who would have thought that in 2019, years after my passing, DJ Kygo would remix the song, getting over 1 billion listens. In 1991, at the age of 28, I was invited to sing the American anthem at the Super Bowl. Although at first it caused a lot of controversy because due to the noise in the stadium, they decided to use a pre-recorded voice, the truth is that it was released as a single, becoming one of the most popular renditions of the anthem in history. I donated part of the proceeds to the American Red Cross Gulf Crisis Fund, and years later it would be used again to raise funds after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. My third world tour, I'm Your Baby Tonight, kicked off in 1991 with over 96 dates, including a historic 10-date sold-out residency at London's Wembley Arena. Chapter 4: Whitney and Her Bodyguard. Due to the success of my music, I began to receive offers to work in film with Robert De Niro, Quincy Jones, and Spike Lee. But no role suited me until I was introduced to The Bodyguard. Released in 1992, I played a starlet stalked by a crazed fan who hires a bodyguard, Kevin Costner, to protect her. Although critics did not praise the film, it was a runaway success. Still one of the highest-grossing films in history. Much of its success was due to the soundtrack, which among others included I Will Always Love You, a 1974 Dolly Parton song that became an international smash hit, raising my fame even higher. Imagine how popular I became that Saddam Hussein used an Arabic version of the song for his election campaign. The song alone sold over 24 million copies, becoming my first diamond single, as well as giving me another Grammy Award for Record of the Year in 1994. I'll Always Love You remains the best-selling U.S. physical single in history by a female artist. The entire soundtrack, which includes 6 of my songs, reached the top spot on the Billboard 200 and stayed there for 20 weeks. It is the second longest-running female album to stay at #1 on the chart, after Adele's 21. All songs are big hits. I'm sure I Have Nothing rings a bell.
I have nothing.
And what about I'm Every Woman? Or the mythical Run to You.
I wanna run to you.
With total sales of 45 million copies, it is not only the best-selling album by a female artist in history, but also the best-selling soundtrack of all time. In 1994, I was invited to the state dinner at the White House in honor of then South African President Nelson Mandela after the apartheid. I would later give 3 concerts in South Africa in front of more than 200,000 people. It was the biggest media event in the country since the inauguration of Nelson Mandela himself. Quite an honor.
Yippee!
The Bodyguard tour took me around the world again between 1993 and 1994. My second film came in 1995. Waiting to Exhale. I also accompanied it with a soundtrack full of African American artists and 5 of my own songs. Among them, Exhale, Shoop Shoop.
You will exhale, yeah. Say shoot, shoot.
Although the highlight was the collaboration with Cissy Winans on Count on Me, a song I composed with my brother Michael and Babyface. I got a taste for the big screen, so in 1996, I starred in the Christmas comedy The Preacher's Wife. I was paid $10 million for that role, making me the highest-paid African-American actress in Hollywood. The predominantly gospel soundtrack featured my mother, Cissy Houston, and was the best-selling gospel album in history, especially for the wonderful song Step by Step.
Step by step, you know I'm taking that bit by bit, bit by bit.
I decided to start a film production company that would make films showing aspects of African American life that had not been brought to the screen before. My first production was a television remake of Cinderella. In 1997, I raised $300 million for the Children's Defense Fund, with 3 concerts broadcast on HBO under the name HBO Whitney. A year later, at 34, I received the Quincy Jones Award for my entire career. My husband, Bobby Brown, was not doing as well as I was. In fact, he decided to retire because my shadow was too long. He didn't like being just the accompanist, but he had no choice. I, seeing our marriage faltering, stopped singing for a while to be more with him. Then I made him my manager. But Bobby wanted to be on stage, and none of that helped. It was a very hard period. Bobby was caught with another girl.
What the fuck?
Then he crashed his car in Hollywood. He was accused of sexual harassment by a female worker. He even hit me on several occasions. But I didn't want to be like my mother, a divorcee, so I put up with it all. All that made me turn to drugs even more. My marijuana and cocaine consumption increased. The truth is that I lost control, so much so that I had to cancel several performances. My mother insisted me to go to rehab, but my father said I didn't need it, and finally I didn't go. But it didn't stop there. Do you remember Robin? Besides being a great friend, she was very important in the development of my career. She managed the relationship with the record company, my dresses, the scenery, and above all, she was one of my biggest supporters. This didn't sit well with Bobby Brown either, who got along very badly with Robin. One day, Robin, fed up with Bobby, gave me an ultimatum. Either I stayed with her or with Bobby. What was I going to do? With all the pain in my heart, I stayed with my husband. Robin and I stopped talking for years. My father took advantage of that moment to become my sole manager. His intention was clear: to keep more money for himself. In fact, he started stealing money from me. When I found out, I couldn't believe it. It hurt me a lot, and I broke up with him. Believe me, I was heartbroken. Chapter 5, Music or Drugs, The Final Battle. It was 1998, and between touring and all my personal problems, it had been 8 years without recording an album. It was time, so I went into the studio in a record time of 6 weeks and recorded My Love Is Your Love. The record included my long-awaited duet with America's other female voice, Mariah Carey. The track was called When You Believe and was part of the animated movie The Prince of Egypt.
There can be miracles.
Critics loved the record, calling it biting, sharp, and satisfying. The truth is that it had a funkier and edgier sound than the previous ones. It included hits like It's Not Right, But It's Okay.
It's not right, but it's okay. I'm gonna
Another of the most acclaimed tracks was the album's title track, My Love Is Your Love.
It's my love, and my love is your love, baby.
Album stayed on the charts for over 2 years, selling 11 million copies worldwide. I went on tour with 70 dates, although as I told you, I canceled many concerts because of my drug problem. Of course, I didn't give that reason, but throat problems. In the second part of the tour in 1999 in Europe, I was feeling better, and the tour ended up being the highest-grossing stadium tour of the year in the old continent. That 1999, I was named the best-selling female R&B artist of the century, with certified U.S. sales of 51 million records at the time. This contributed to me signing that year the best contract any artist has ever had, $100 million. My father promptly sued me for that amount, claiming that I had signed the contract because of him. Sometime later, in 2003, he passed away. I did not attend his funeral, although during his illness I did go to say goodbye to him one day. The lawsuit, of course, was dismissed, and I did not have to pay the $100 million. As a sign of my influence as a gay icon, in June 1999, in the midst of the album tour, I made a surprise appearance at the 13th annual New York Gay and Lesbian Pride Ball. In 2000, I released my first compilation album, Whitney, The Greatest Hits. The album included several collaborations such as Could I Have This Kiss Forever, a duet with Enrique Iglesias. I also recorded the song If I Told You That with George Michael. I had always had a good girl image, but in the 2000s that changed. My drug use made me late for interviews, photo shoots, and rehearsals. I canceled concerts and TV appearances. I was fired from the Oscars performance, and I even missed the ceremony where my friend and owner of my label, Clive Davis, was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. All this was also reflected in my physique. I lost weight, was gaunt, shaky, distracted, and had an erratic demeanor. In 2002, I gave an interview to promote my next album. Of course, I was only asked about my drug use and my relationship with my husband. Tired of all the media persecution, I stated that he had never used crack because it was cheap. Crack is crazy, I said. However, I admitted to using alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, and pills. I even commented that Bobby Brown didn't hit me, but I hit him. My fifth studio album, Just Whitney, was released in 2002, produced by Bobby Brown, Missy Elliott, and Babyface. We spent months recording it because I was always in bad shape and it showed in my voice. Still, it was the highest first week of sales of all my albums, although overall it was less successful. It had very powerful dance tracks like You Light Up My Life. A year later, I released my first Christmas album, One Wish the Holiday Album, with a collection of traditional Christmas songs. My life was still an earthquake. In 2003, Bobby assaulted me, which the police verified by the wounds on my face. My husband had several run-ins with the law for drunk driving, drug possession, and this assault, spending some time in jail. Despite that, I stayed with him, and in 2004, he convinced me to participate in a reality show called Being Bobby Brown, in which I was seen in unsavory situations. The critics said it was disgusting, but the truth is that it had a good audience. In 2004, I finally entered a detox center, although when I got out, I went back to drugs and entered again in 2005. Eventually, I understood that one of the demons that had led me to seek refuge in drugs was that a woman had abused me and my siblings at the time when our parents traveled a lot, when we were small and we were left in the care of several families. One of them, believe it or not, was my Aunt Diddy Warwick. All that made me spend those years almost like a zombie, not knowing who I was. The one who bore the brunt of my drug use and bad relationship with Bobby Brown was my poor daughter, Chrissy. Living with an alcoholic and a drug addict as parents made my daughter another drug addict. Chrissy hated me and attempted suicide on one occasion. In 2006, after 14 years of marriage, I finally filed for divorce from Bobby Brown. I was determined to get clean and finally be a mother to Bobby Christina. After 8 months of rehab, I ran out of money. I had lost my fortune, so I went on tour, but I didn't have the energy, the strength, or the voice to do it. So the concerts were a total failure. In 2009, I would record a new album titled I Look to You. The album went to #1 on the Billboard 200 thanks to 2 singles, $Million Bill and especially the title track, I Look to You.
And you hear a song, I look to you.
Later, I embarked on a world tour entitled Nothing But Love World Tour. It was my first world tour in over 10 years and was billed as a triumphant return. However, I canceled some concerts due to illness and received widespread negative reviews from fans disappointed with the quality of my voice and performance. Some fans even left the concerts. Shortly after, in 2011, I checked back into a rehab center. I was feeling much better, so I decided to go back to the big screen to do a remake of a 70s movie called Sparkle.
I sing because I'm happy.
That made me very happy. I was better than ever. But the movie ended, I went home, and with it back to my bad habits. It was 2012, I was 48 years old, and always appeared disheveled and erratic. My last public performance would be at a Clive Davis pre-Grammy party singing Jesus Loves Me.
Jesus loves me, for the Bible tells me.
2 days later, on February 11th, 2012, I was at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. I had consumed various drugs as usual: Xanax, cannabis, cocaine. At one point, I blacked out, falling into the bathtub where I would drown. At the funeral mass, lots of artists performed, such as Stevie Wonder, Alicia Keys, R. Kelly. Just 3 years later, in 2015, my daughter Bobby Christina was found unconscious, also in the bathtub at home, passing away a few months later. After my passing, my music would live on for me. In fact, I would get the Guinness World Record for the highest grossing posthumous female celebrity, $30 million, among other things for the greatest hits album released under the name I Will Always Love You, the best of Whitney Houston. In 2019, DJ Kygo made an electronic version of my song Higher Love, which became a worldwide hit. In 2022, a movie biopic starring me was made titled I Wanna Dance with Somebody. The movie, Whitney New, Classic, and Reimagined. The soundtrack included reimagined remixes of some of my classics. The following year, 2023, they released the first compilation of my gospel songs, I Go to the Rock, the gospel music of Whitney Houston, including demos I had recorded when I was 17 years old. It would be a great success in the United States because my music is timeless. Whitney Houston deftly managed between great ballads, dance pop songs, and the most elegant urban soul. And she was one of the best vocalists of all time. But that's not all. Whitney was a cultural icon, and her contribution to the success of African American artists in the pop scene is undeniable. Besides being a list breaker with more than 220 million records sold worldwide and holding the record for the best-selling single by a female artist. Can you guess? Of course, because of I Will Always Love You. And it was not by chance that Houston was known by the nickname of The Voice.
Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you liked it a lot. If so, please subscribe to Trembol, like it, and above all, share it with everyone.
Thank you very much, Trembles. We love you.